If the human brain was dissected, thrown into a machine, and turned into a database to create a pyramid that would showcase the most universal, unpleasant feeling a human could ever experience, in ascending order, starting from the bottom, it would look something like this: the feeling of hunger, pain, and total loss of hope, the emotional trauma of losing a loved one, the emotional trauma of finding out that your girlfriend cheated on your best friend the day you went out shopping for her engagement ring and came back home to find her ring finger being used for a completely different purpose on your best friend, an underwater shark attack, and the feeling of staring at a question paper and going blank during the exam. To get to the top of that pyramid is less of a miracle and more of a systematic behavior of absolute ignorance, unbelievable overconfidence, and severe underpreparation that begins 3 weeks before the day of the exam itself. On the day the exam timetable had arrived, the student was living the best time of his life. That is, doing anything except studying for the upcoming exams. Once the timetable does arrive, he still keeps having the time of his life because the exam is so far away, it is unfathomable that it could even happen. It's just a myth, a legend, a fairy tale. In the second week, things are pretty much the same, except this time the teachers now keep reminding of the impending exams, and the ranker blokes start putting up a straight face if they do happen to have any other face. But the student is still completely detached because exam is a construct made by the society for losers, and the day of the exam is still 17 billion light years away. The student wouldn't have made this reference because light years is a measure of distance, not time, but how could he know? He hasn't started preparing because the physics exam is still 17 billion light years away. The third week is the week he promises he would finally start studying, and here it finally arrives. He picks up his book and sits down to study with great energy, impenetrable focus, and solid determination, and falls asleep 5 minutes later. The student has never had such an amazing nap in his life. He wakes up, realizes he has wasted 47 minutes, tries to study for a bit more, before calling it a day and watching YouTube videos of other guys making videos to procrastinate from studying for their own exams. The second day, having now had a bit of practice, the student seems to sit in front of the book for more than 10 minutes without dozing off, only to realize he understands nothing, and all those hours spent during the lecture playing hand cricket did not help him one bit. The rest of the day goes in making phone calls, watching online lectures, copying notes, or outrightly borrowing them, and promising to study from the next day now that he has all the resources to study. The third day begins with picking up the first chapter out of the existing 13 and ends with the first chapter out of the existing 12 because he has decided to skip the last chapter. The fourth day is much better than the third because the student has made some progress and calls up his friends to know what they are up to. But halfway through the call, he recollects the last time he called them and how they talked about how underprepared they were, only to outscore him in all subjects convincingly. He cuts the call, realizes that life is nothing but full of misery, betrayal, and shallow friends before his friend calls him back and they spend the next hour talking about their favorite pizza toppings. On the fifth day, the student wakes up early to type on the internet how to study for the subject in 3 days, which quickly moves to how to finish the subject in 2 days, which is later rephrased to can I pass the exam by preparing for one day, and finally ends with oh god, please let me die. It's not even a question by the end. On the sixth day, the student thinks he is not the problem, but his system of studying is, and so decides to have a group study session with his friends and one topper who has decided to help them out. The session ends with covering three study related topics, gaining a thorough working knowledge on how the plot of the film Inception works, and making 10 different extremely immature jokes on the topic Uranus. On the seventh and final day before the exam, the student becomes a sage, the servant, the believer, the messenger of all existing religions. He sits in the corner of a room and chants, Thy Lord, our God, is merciful and forgiving, even though we have rebelled against him. Bismillah al-Rahman al-Rahim, Bolo Shri Ramchandra ki Jai. He will also try to meditate because Buddha said so. The atheist student, on the other hand, makes a duel with God, saying if he does exist, he shall prove so by passing him in the exams tomorrow. After making the single biggest set of resolutions since New Year and making pacts to avoid all vices henceforth and only indulge in good habits from here on, but if and only if he were to pass one last time, the student makes his way to the exam hall. There are majorly two forms of questions he'll face during the allotted 3 hours: MCQs and descriptives, for which he shall spend half an hour in reading and rereading them, trying to remember if he knows any of them. During the first hour, the student makes a very sincere effort to actually try and solve them on his own, while also trying to shut down his mind from humming that one catchy song that has been inside his head ever since morning. Knowing that he knows nothing at all and having the self awareness of Socrates, he first attempts to solve the MCQs using the elimination method. That is, eliminating options he thinks that are definitely not the answer and ends up eliminating all the answers. Having failed spectacularly now, he goes back to focusing on choosing the correct option and changes the answer 5 times in 3 minutes. At this point, he realizes he has spent 10 minutes on a 1 mark question and decides to leave it, promising to come back to it later. He will never come back to it later. In fact, he will end up unattempting it. Those circles will remain unbubbled and stay a virgin for the rest of their lives. In the descriptive section, halfway through attempting the only question he knows, he realizes that he is stuck, loses whatever hope he had left inside him, and gives up and chooses the last resort he has come prepared for. Cheating comes in all methods and sizes. Cheats are handy and reliable as the student can whoop them out of his ass, pockets, shoes, pens, box, and boxes like a magician charged for sexual harassment. He can also prepare for contingencies in case someone catches him by making it disappear so quickly that would put MH370 look like a divorce case. Hand signals and copying from friends are also other options available to the student, but it has one major flaw that none of the students are aware of. The problem with copying is that out of a given 30 students in an exam hall, 5 are the toppers busy solving the questions and will never involve in such unholy activities. The next 5 are sincerely trying their best to attempt questions and write whatever they know. The next 10 know that their exam skills and cheating skills both suck, so what's the point in even trying? Which leaves the remaining 10 mediocre students trying to copy and share amongst themselves answers to which none of them know are correct. It becomes a circle jerk of people convincing each other that what they have written is right. All this also depends on one other major factor, the invigilator. Some invigilators are the watchdogs of human morality and are the eye of Sauron themselves. Water vapor, dust particles, a fly, nothing moves without the permission of the invigilator. But the majority of them are simply there to act as DHL courier agents to pass on the question paper and answer sheets to the students. The last half hour of the exam is the most exciting. Each event is an opportunity to cheat, such as the invigilator turning his back towards the student, the meeting of an invigilator with a fellow teacher, a topper asking for extra sheets, the electricity going out and coming back up so the fans can now create a vacuum of noise to cheat more loudly. Every act is an exhibition of the human brain working at 100% capacity in an exam hall for all the wrong purposes. Finally, during the last 5 minutes, some answers light up from the subconscious part of the mind. The student gets one last bout of energy he didn't know he had. The handwriting turns into Morse code turned in ink. Mathematical calculations and covert operations take place as the teacher now starts collecting answer sheets, and the student tries to put pen on paper like a stoneman in a cave before having it snatched from his clutches and leaving the last sentence unfinished, making it look like the student had a stroke in the end. Once the student gets out of the exam hall, he has two options: either talk about it with his friends and drown himself in further misery, or be happy that it is over and spend the rest of the day without a care in the world. Gods forgotten, mistakes forgiven, and the next exam another 17 billion light years away. Farewell.